have been really, I don't do things to be just doing it for fun.
You're
I do it to
streaming.
win.
I
Do it to
love the
win.
fact that you do things to win, Adrian. Sorry for talking over you, but the streaming started and you can see I'm in a different location today, but welcome. We've got Adrian and Paul. And today what we're going to talk about is if you got a windfall of $1 million, what would you do with it? How would you spend it or invest it or save it, or would you put it under your pillow? So it's just going to be interesting to see the differences. So before we get going, hello, Adrian, and hello, Paul. How are you guys going?
Hi, Paul.
Very
Great,
good.
thanks.
All right, okay. All right, well, I think I'll start with Adrian while he's got a nice mouth of coffee in his coffee full of mouthful of coffee. Can't even speak today. Adrian, if you were to get $1 million windfall, what would you do with it?
I would take a very small amount of it and find a product that everybody wants and set up a website to sell it. And then I'd get a VA to run it for me. And then I would look at making $1 million out of that. So I had $2 million.
So when you say a small amount, what do you mean by small amount? You're talking 10,000,
I'm talking
100,000?
You don't even need 100,000. You need maybe $10,000 to do a little bit of research and spend $2,000 on a e-commerce website to sell that product. And a couple of a couple of hours from a VA to monitor the sales and process the customers and things like that, and just use that to make another $1 million.
Well, then the obvious question becomes, right, $10,000 you're talking about.
Yes.
Why aren't you doing it now? Why don't you do it now? Anyone can come up with $10,000.
Yes, because that is, that's e-commerce and that's selling things, which I wouldn't do that unless I was pushed hard to do it. I was taught to never sell molecules. Okay, everything's made of molecules. Books, coffee cups, computers, they're all made with molecules. The raw materials need to be sourced. They have to be manufactured by people. They have to be transported by people, warehoused by people, put on ships. You've got to pay insurance. You have to have them unloaded. They have to have them warehoused again, and then wholesaled, and then retail. There's just too many variables.
This is only going to be 20 minutes. So.
Can you mute?
Sorry, I'm trying to put Paul comments on mute. Okay, I think he's back now. All right. You were saying, Adrian?
I was saying, so, molecules require a lot of expense. Even with e-commerce, there's other people involved. Service-based industries are not much different. But when you're talking about the movement of information, that's a lot easier. Digital. No borders, no warehouse. The only warehousing you do is on your computer, something you can duplicate, and that's in high demand. So you get $10,000 or $1 million or $100,000. You don't sit there thinking of an idea to come up with to invest that money. You find out what everyone wants to buy. You buy it and sell it to them cheaper than their competitors or more than their competitors if you can add value. I know a lot of people would say put it on, buy a house, but $1 million in Australia is not going to get you very far. Um,
I hear what you're saying, Adrian, about the house, but no, we'll see what I've come up with. Paul Cummins, what would you do with $1 million?
I think the first thing, if you didn't have it before and you've suddenly got it, you need to change your mindset so that you keep it. Most people that have for example, a lottery or lotto windfall, they're back in the same position within 12 months. They just spend it on stuff that doesn't produce anything. So they get out of their comfort zone and they end up in the same position. So if I had $1 million, I'd put it into mainly into income producing assets. I'd take a little bit aside to take a break. The idea of employing a part-time VA is always appealing. That would take some pressure off and enable other things to be done. So quality of life and quality of time would be what I'd be looking forward to create in the longer term. And so with what I'm doing now, it might be maybe setting up a new location for the simulators or something like that in another place. Certainly getting the marketing and things out there and getting some income, an ongoing return from it. Because as Adrian said, $1 million isn't even going to buy a house. In some places, northwest Sydney, even to buy a block of land out around Rouse Hill, it's $900,000 what it was, and that was about 4 years ago, just to buy a block of land. It's ridiculous. So I wouldn't be putting it into real estate unless it was for a deposit on a property that was income producing and was cash flow positive as well.
So there's a few things that you said that I love. The first thing that you started off with is you've got to change your mindset. And if you have the right mindset, you have the $1 million already. So that's probably the wisest thing anybody could actually say. And I suppose the question becomes is, you've won lotto, you've got that $1 million. What steps will you take to change your mindset, Paul?
I think part of it is, it's not how much money you have either, it's what you do with it. If you're a consumer, you go out, shopping or have an affinity with shopping, then it doesn't matter how much money you have. Most people even get a salary increase. What happens is their level of spending actually goes up, so they don't really get any further ahead or find that they're saving. Just the level of their lifestyle changes to match what they've got. Rather for me, it's about the experiences and what you have in life and things like that. So I'm not a big consumer. I mean, most department stores would hate me in terms of, I guess there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. So, rich might be having the physical cash and the money. But most people that have got those things also have large debts behind it. Or you can be wealthy and understand what's important in life. You can have a lifestyle that is still rewarding without having to be the consumer or spend lots of money. And having those life experiences and sharing the moments, with people that are important in your life. That's what I guess drives me and what's important behind it.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And the other thing you said is you buy income producing assets. And both of you said there's $1 million can't really buy you anything in Sydney, a property in Sydney. But it might be able to buy you a property somewhere outside of Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. What other kind of income producing properties do you think you might be looking at acquiring, Adrian?
I think, not so much income producing, it would just be also travel, I think, would be the thing to do. Use that space to travel and maybe look further afield for opportunities overseas.
How about you, Paul?
Well, for me, with what I want to create, the ability to work in different locations, I'd be wanting to set up and expand what I'm doing with the simulators. I've got a fairly big vision for that already. So to have multiple locations with simulators in each location to service the Australian market at least, and attract people from overseas. And I guess with that is then getting to a level where there's a manager so that I can actually travel and I can go and see airlines overseas and things and encourage them to come to Australia and do part of their training or use the services over here. But I think you've actually, if you only had $1 million, you need to create and use that as the building block and the stepping stone to get onto a new level. Because if you get too involved with the here and now without planning, you'll just end up back in the same situation. Maybe you've achieved a little bit, but then thinking, okay, what do I do now? I've just blown $1 million on whatever. And you can quite easily do that with, flights and things, easily burn through money on, flights that are even business class are quite expensive. And if you don't have the vehicle, or maybe setting up the mechanisms behind it, so a company or a business where you can actually do the travel, that's really one way that you can make the travel more cost effective, because it's associated with the business rather than out of your own personal pocket as well. So there's other ways and means of doing it and combining what you want to do with your life in terms of the business aspects as well.
Yeah, so just for people that might be watching this, Paul Cummins he's got his own flight simulator business. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your business, Paul?
Yeah, the simulators are aimed at professional pilot training for people either who are already at the airline level, maybe been stood down during COVID, need to be able to keep themselves current for an interview or before they return. And there's still a lot of pilots that haven't returned to work, even though there's a shortage. For pilots that want to upgrade to join an airline and prepare for their airline interview. And there are some required courses for people to do to get their airline transport pilot license from the commercial. So I'm working on getting the regulatory approvals for those at the moment. So the simulators are airline types such as Boeing 737, Airbus 320. I've got a fighter jet simulator, F-18, Super Hornet, light aircraft simulator, and there's a few more planned that I can't speak about just for the next couple of days, but there's some other things happening in the background as well that are pretty exciting. So it looks like I'm going to end up with a few more simulators on top of that as well.
Well, I know both Adrian and I have been to your, what you call your flight simulator hub in Marrickville.
Yes.
And we've had a lot of fun. You had a lot of fun on these flight simulators, didn't you, Adrian?
Yes, a lot of fun. The most fun business.
It is the most fun business, and
entertainment is the most fun business. The most fun you can have doing business if you're entertaining.
Yeah, and there's an entertainment side to it. Although the primary focus is on the airline side of it, there is the public access available as well for the simulators with appropriate instructors to show members of the public what it's like to be in a cockpit. Looking at also running fear flying courses, human factors courses, leadership and corporate training, and team building as well. So there's a few other aspects. And also having the training space for people to come in and run their own events as well.
Yeah, it certainly is a lot of fun. So now before we go on to my next question, if I had $1 million, if I got $1 million, and this is what I'm actually in the process of doing, the first thing I would do is I would build a granny flat at the back of the house, right? Granny flat might cost about $250,000 to build, but the return on that gives you a positive income, positive cash flow, which is what Paul was talking about. I think you were talking about it as well. So that's going to increase your cash flow, because really it's all about cash flow. You can have $1 million, but if you've got negative cash flow, the $1 million is going to go away quite quickly. And then beyond that, I would actually have a look at actually borrowing money or acquiring another positively geared property, perhaps a NDIS property where you're going to get about 12% return. And, and then once you've got the two properties, let's say you've got $1 million equity in a property, you might look at borrowing money and getting another positively geared property. So you've got 3 positively geared properties, which might give you a ton of cash flow. And that $1 million will grow very quickly. All right, so Adrian, the question becomes is, $1 million, it used to be a ton of money, but nowadays, as you said, you can't even buy something in Sydney with that. What if it was like $10 million? Would that change the way you would invest?
No, I think you want to do the same thing, because like Paul said, you know, most people who win the lottery, they spend it all, or they try to invest it, but they just, you know, do very bad investment and then just exist the same way on a higher expense bill every month. So what you really want is to just do everything that is going to work. So like a granny flat might work. Yes, that's better than buying a house that's buying a small house. Diversification may not be the answer either. You may be, depending on what's going on in the economy when you win that money, you may be advised to not spread everything around in different baskets. You might be better to go after one particular thing and specialize. Of course, some people have, I talked to someone yesterday, they have a bucket list and they're ticking things madly off a bucket list. A bucket list is more or less for them travel and experiences that are somewhat like related to travel or enjoyment. And that's the bucket list, but nothing about helping a certain number of people or a certain group of people, nothing on the bucket list about family, nothing on the bucket list about a greater good or something bigger than themselves that they could help contribute to or achieve. They were all very, very simple wants that most people have, rather than what they wanted to be remembered by. Even it was only really just a laundry list of travel destinations that they were ticking off, which, you know, people used to do that 20 and 30 years ago with their passport, and filling their passport up with stamps was a great sign of achievement. Until you've filled up 2 passports, it really loses its cachet with you, right? After you've done that, you start thinking about the cost of replacing the passport every time you fill up a passport, rather than filling it up with stamps. So everything is relative, but what people lack is the ability to make money. So maybe investing in a course or something that's going to teach them how to keep that money or make that money would be as good as the mindset as well.
Absolutely. It is all about mindset. And both of you have alluded to this. People that have won massive sums of money lose it and actually end up broke and bankrupt. And if you have a look at someone like Mike Tyson, who, how many hundreds of millions of dollars did he make in his boxing career? And he lost it all. So managing money is actually an important skill set to have. Let's throw this to you, Paul. If you got a $10 million windfall, would that change your attitude?
Overall, no. I mean, you and I did a course years ago through universal. And one of the presenters talked about it's not how much you earn, it's how much you have at the end of the month type thing. And it's what you do between times. And that's what I was alluding to before. Rather than increasing your expenditure as such, you can still have a good lifestyle, which means also then you don't need to work as hard, things like that, even without the $1 million or 10 million. So if you got to the $10 million stage, I'd probably be still doing things in the same proportion in terms of doing something and spending on those assets to produce other income. So it would fast track it by having 10 instead of 1 million. So, just coming back to what I was talking about before, it would possibly, as well as opening up a new centre, would be adding other simulators to it, or a higher quality simulator. But also maybe looking at something else that was fun in the business. So I'd probably expand it into real aircraft or something like that as well. So, have a jet or a helicopter as part of the business associated with it for training and for corporate charter and things like that. Aviation's a sort of a fun business to be in anyway, but it would, some of the other goals that I was looking at and thinking it's going to be really hard to achieve them, having that $10 million would enable that to happen as well. But then there's also managing the risk side of it as well. Aviation can be up and down very quickly as well.
Yeah, and I think you showed me once, it's not that expensive to actually buy an aeroplane if you know where to look and how to get it.
It depends what you're wanting.
I think you showed me an aeroplane once for what, $74,000 or something like that. Was that right?
That was a twin-engine Piper Navajo. For what I'd be looking at, I'd be going more up market than that, and the other one that I showed you would be okay for private use, but I'd be wanting to have a jet that could do something a little bit faster and, transport people between cities and things like that.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun thing to do as well. So for me, I think it would change my attitude. I think it's a big step between $1 and $10 million, and I think that I suppose it'll be hard because the first temptation will be to go and get your bucket list and tick something off your bucket list. Adrian, do you actually have a bucket list?
I do not have a bucket list. I have achieved many of the things that I've wanted to achieve already. So, it's just a question of maybe enjoying those things again in a different place or with different people.
So with all of those experiences that you've had, there's a top 10 or 15 that you have at the top of your list?
Yeah, I mean, the greatest thing is I'm working on some of them. So, every day is a joy in doing them. I don't have to tick them off the list because I'm contributing to them every day. So achieving them, I might not finish them. Maybe $10 million would not help me finish it or get closer to having it, because it's a question of time too. Even if you've got $10 million, doesn't mean you can't grow a tree faster than it wants to grow or has to grow.
Well
I
said.
think you are probably, you've heard before, rich people have a lot of money, wealthy people have a lot of time. I concentrate on having a lot of time for the people who need time from me when they need it. My family, my friends, my clients. Having that time makes me feel richer than, having $10 million in the bank account, because those people need help. And, people you help often can help other people. So it's great.
Yep, well said. How about you, Paul? Have you got a bucket list?
No, and I was thinking about before when Adrian was talking about it. So rather than a bucket list, which is, you know, that's what you do before you die type thing, what about having a life list? I mean, things that you do now to improve things for your own well-being, and then you don't have to tick off a bucket list later on. You know, equating things around combining business travel, you know, that would tick off some of those things that people would otherwise call a bucket list. Yeah, there's places that I'd like to go to. And people are starting bucket lists earlier and earlier on in life. But as Adrian said, it's also rewarding to help people. And that's one of the things that I want to do as well. And that's, I guess, part of the life list and mission that I want to do is to help people. And a few projects I've done have been around homelessness and helping people, and also around mental health as well. So they're areas that I care about and, you know, want to make a difference in people's lives as well.
Yes, giving while living.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. There's definitely, I mean, I'd like to go to places like Turkey and some other countries, the Greek islands and things. And most people, they're ticking off, as Adrian said, the stamps in the passport, all those bucket list things, and doing it once. You know, maybe setting up a lifestyle where you could live in different places for a period of time, so it becomes more than just that simple collection. You're actually having an experience. The times where I have travelled and enjoyed the most is where, rather than being somewhere as a tourist, I've spent a week and I've had somebody there with local experience, and it actually felt like a local living. I'm trying to think of a couple of places where that occurred. One was in Norway. Actually, we stayed with somebody over there years ago, and he was a friend of a friend, an Australian. And having someone with that local knowledge and being able to spend a week in a place, it's a totally different experience to being there as a tourist. Lived in Malaysia for a couple of years as well, and the same. You get to experience a country in a whole different way. And if I went there as a tourist, it would have been completely different. Yeah, so things like that become the life list rather than the bucket list.
Okay, so look, those are great insights, and thank you for your time. I suppose it all depends on the amount of time you've got left. I know somebody who's got 4 months left and is going to get $1.3 million. So, you know you can blow it, not having to worry about 10 years down the track. So thank you guys for your input today. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah,
Look forward to it.
thank you too,
Thanks,
Paul.
Adrian.
Thanks for inviting.